OMG, or else you're out of touch old fart.
Good way to start the show. I could say that about myself as well. And all right, well, ladies and gentlemen, Brooke and I normally have some fun little patter at the beginning. We're going to eschew that today. Another word that I don't use often, and I'm not entirely sure I just use it correctly, but there's a good reason for this. You know, I recently saw this article of the 10 greatest business thought leaders of our generation. I was actually honored to know one of these pretty well. Peter Drucker was my teacher in graduate school, a mentor, and today we have an opportunity to meet all of us, one of those people on that list, the legendary Tom Peters. Tom, of course, is the author of the best-selling book in business history, In Search of Excellence, and now he's published what he's characterizing as his last book. It's here, Extreme Excellence Now, Extreme Humanism. Now, if you followed my work, you'll know I'm wild about that title. Mr. Peters, sir, welcome to the show.
Well, you called me Mr. Peters instead of Tom, and I will respond by being formal because I am bowing down to someone who actually spent time sitting in a classroom with Peter Drucker.
3 years. 3 years.
Wow. Really? Oh,
yeah.
At Claremont or someplace else?
Claremont Graduate University. Yeah.
I love that school.
Yes.
Do you know the work of Charles Handy, the Brit?
I do not.
Yeah. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There is a Drucker Institute at Claremont.
Yeah.
And
I've been involved in that.
Oh yeah. Well, great. Because they asked me, I hadn't planned to do any such thing. They asked me to give them all my papers and rough drafts and so on. And I'm a Stanford Business School graduate, but to Stanford, it's just one more body who came out the door. Plus, as a Stanford graduate, you're a failure if your net worth is not over $1 billion. And I love the Drucker Institute, and I love them. And I know we have a mixed group watching us, meaning not everybody's the CEO of a giant company, praise the Lord. But they think the Milton Friedman inspired 1970 maximize shareholder value and F the people is the worst thing that has happened to business, as do I. If you're going to take Joe Paterno's statue down at Penn State, you should take Friedman's statue down at the University of Chicago.
Yeah. Well, I want to introduce Brooke. Brooke is my co-host here today.
Hi.
And we wanted to go ahead.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Oh, I like you.
Oh my God. You're looking like hangover from Easter. That's a wonderful, refreshing color on your sweater. I love it. I love it.
So
I would probably be insulting you if I said the Easter Bunny is still here and around, but it's meant in a positive way.
Yeah.
So
I'm hard to insult. Be yourself.
So here's our challenge today. Is I was working on this, thinking, what do you ask Tom Peters in a 30-minute interview that he hasn't been asked a million times? So what we're going to do today is Brooke and I are going to just give you 5 or 6 words, depending on how much time we have together, that sort of represent key words from your career and certainly are highlighted in your new book, Extreme Humanism. So, Brooke, why don't you give Tom his first word?
Your first word, Mr. Tom Peters, is compassion.
I want to respond in 2 ways. First of all, despite my advanced age, Tom, please.
Yes.
Mr. is appreciated as a mark of respect, though actually at this point I consider it a mark of old age. I've got to, I know I'm not allowed to go off into the boondocks, but I've got to tell you that I live in Massachusetts, lived in California for 30 years, but my mother was a Southerner. And, I think she did motherly love, but the most important thing she did was good manners. And I describe that to somebody as saying, look, I'm 78 and I still say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, to an 18-year-old clerk who has a long record of juvenile delinquency. Just can't help it. And it's not a trivial thing. It is a good way to start, particularly where we are. Good manners always work. Good manners are the essence of decency and respect. And if there are two attributes of leadership that matter, it is decency and respect, which leads us directly to compassion. And you guys are kind enough to push my book with a cover picture. And so I'm going to push yours, another cover picture. This is a wonderful book that just came out called Compassionomics. It is an awful sounding title, which is why it's perfect. It is written by a couple of MDs. It is a couple of MDs who are hard-nosed, hard-ass take-no-prisoners researchers. That is, they don't breathe without having research background. And it is the power in a healthcare setting of a little bit of compassion. They have a magic number that came out of research things called the magic number 37. There were, kind of 20 studies, but they boiled down to this. If the busy doctor spends an extra 37 seconds of eye contact with me while he is giving me a horrid cancer diagnosis, my hospital stay will be cut by about 25%. My side effects will be cut by about 25% just because of the eye contact. And I like to think, and I'm sure you guys do too, compassion is a natural human trait, which it is. But, there was this horrible, horrible thing. I live near Boston. We have this hospital called Mass General, which is one of the great hospitals in the world, blah, 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 blah. There was research from Mass General a couple of years ago, and it said that nurse to patient eye contact in the last few years has gone down by 70%. And the reason is that the bloody nurse, not of her own doing or his own doing, carries a tablet around. And instead of looking the patient in the eye, they're entering bloody data, most of which is finance data on how much do I charge him for the pencil, the tip of which he broke the lead. And it's just tragic. And I know I can go on. I'm not supposed to go on and on and on, but I've just got to give you this most wonderful, fantastic, amazing study that I have ever come across in my life. So I fell down, and being an old fart and being on blood thinner, they decided that I needed, just for safety's sake, to get a CAT scan, brain CAT scan. So as usual, you go into a room, and there are a couple of techs there, and the techs execute the brain scan. And 2 hours later, if it's whatever, or 2 minutes if it's an emergency, or a day later, the radiologist looks at the screen, which of course is loaded with data, basically. Somebody came up with an interesting idea. And the interesting idea was that in the upper right-hand corner of Dr. Peters's screen, there will be a little 1 inch by 1 inch photograph of the patient. 1 inch by 1 inch photograph. And when you come into the CAT scan room, they said in this treatment, they say, would you mind if we took a little photo? And you don't know what the heck you're doing, so that's fine. If the radiologist has the little photo in the upper right-hand corner, he/she spends twice as much time studying and making the diagnosis, and measurably speaking, the magic word is anomalies. You're looking at Tom's brain, and even besides the injury I was supposed to have, there's a little hoodoo diddly thing up in the corner, which may suggest a problem. They discover twice as many problems.
Wow.
And it's just a frigging little tiny picture, but it is extreme humanization, and it is compassionomics. and I remember reading, and I wrote about the former CEO of Campbell Soup, Doug Conant. Conant said that in his 10 years as CEO, he hand wrote 30,000 thank you notes.
Wow.
And that adds up to, I did the math at one point, I think it's 12 a day or something like that. And then these stories come in. I had one I was exchanging with somebody at Twitter. I send you a thank you note. I had a friend at 3M. He had a retirement party. He was an engineer, ran a little division. He said at the retirement party, a guy came up to him, borderline in tears, to thank him for a handwritten thank you note that he had sent to the guy 10 years before, that the guy still had hanging in his cubicle.
Wow.
But just frigging humanize a little
Right.
bit, and the world is your oyster.
It sort of gets to the next thing, which is certainly one of my great passions. The next phrase, extreme community engagement. And I know you've written a lot about like taking care of people internally, but I'd like to hear about extreme community engagement, what that means externally for a business.
Yeah, well, first of all, what it means in the book is that you got it exactly right. I have implied it in every book. I have not been explicit until this book. And I think perhaps one of the drivers of that is the pandemic, and that we're looking at our fellow human beings in a broader fashion than we have before. But let me give you my response. 80% of us probably work for businesses, not the Fortune 500, which employs 7% of us, but the 2-person accountancy, the 3-person appliance repair shop. My point about community is business is not part of the community. Business is the community, period. It's not doing this. I mean, the worst phrases that I hate, and for God's sakes, I'm trained as a hard-nosed engineer, things like, let's get down to business, suggesting there's no human engagement whatsoever. My friend Bo Burlingham wrote a wonderful book maybe 8 or 10 years ago, and it was called Small Giants, Companies That Chose to Be Great Instead of Big. And he teased out of the data 4 attributes. And one of the 4 attributes was they were highly participative in the communities of which they were a part. I remember in ye olde days, there was a woman by the name of Anita Roddick, alas no longer with us, who started the Body Shop. And at every one of the Body Shop retail locations, maybe there were thousands, certainly there were hundreds, every employee was given with pay 20% of the paycheck to engage in community activities, whether you did it as donations, whether you spent your time, whatever it is. But I've got 20 people who work for me, let us say. They're neighbors. They're part of the community. I got into a dispute on Twitter, and I really understand the point of the person I was disputing with, who said, business is not your family. And I said, I can see what you mean, but you're mainly wrong. Unless you were born with a silver spoon, and I'm not even sure mine made it to 10, unless you were born with a silver spoon, you are going to spend in the course of your adult lifetime more time in your quote unquote business or work activity than you are with your family. And I am delighted that you are bending over backwards, especially during the pandemic, relative to your family and so on. God bless you times 100, and happy Easter and so on. But the reality is, and I've used pretty coarse terms, if you piss away the hours of your employment, you've pissed away your life. Because that's the deal. I don't know how many hours we're awake. Suppose you're awake from 7 until 10, that's 15 hours. Well, minimum of 8 plus 2 of the commute, 10 of the 15 bloody hours is going to be associated with the employment. And so you are my family. I'm not going to quite go as far as I would for my daughter or my mother who was just diagnosed with dementia or something like that. But you're family. You're part of my life. And it can be sycophantish, not sycophantish. It can be, you were dealing with eschew problems. I'm dealing with short-term memory problems. It can paternalistic.
Yeah.
It can be paternalistic.
Yeah.
And I'm not endorsing that, but I am saying, for God's sakes, this conversation right now, this isn't a conversation between 2 or 3 professionals. It's a conversation between 3 people who give a shit about something, are happy to be around each other, and sorry, it's only for 30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
We're a community. We're a micro community. Somebody asked me about something like that, and I said, listen, I love my family. I do this, I do that, and so on. But for this, call it 40, because we're never going to hit 30, for this 40 minutes, and this is not an exaggeration, the 2 of you are my life. I've spent 78 years and 4 months waiting for this moment. And I think it's why I give pretty good speeches, because it's not a bullshit term. It's really easy to call something like that bullshit. But this is it. This is the ball game. Only thing going on the planet for me. There fortunately aren't any bombs bursting in air, but the only thing in the planet is this discussion. And therefore, I am required by my own view of the world to give it 117.346%, for every minute of our short time together.
Okay, so give me 117 point something % on this next one, because I found this very interesting.
Yes, ma'am.
Excellence is the next 5 minutes.
I'm angry about that phrase because I wrote a book in 2018 called The Excellence Dividend.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to call it Excellence is the Next 5 Minutes, but they thought that wasn't timely enough. And, maybe they're right. I don't know. Like all of our conversations so far, one could go on and on and on and on. People think of excellence and they think of a hill to climb, an aspiration, a place to get to in the great whatever. But per the sorts of things I was saying a minute ago, excellence is when, well, I was to say in the F2F world, but also in the Zoom world, excellence is when in the middle of this or the beginning of this Zoom meeting that we are having, I happen to know that you have 2 kids and you're trying to do homeschooling along with your job, and you have a mother who has just gotten a bad diagnosis, and dealing with them in a humane fashion. That is pure, raw, unmitigated excellence. And my practical point for our business watchers and listeners is if I get the next 5 minutes right, I've made an infinite contribution to the organization. The dirty little secret is, and I don't like this, but it's a fact, if I really care about you, you will work your ass off for me. And it's not why I'm caring about you. And the good news is it's really hard to fake. It can't be fake I care about your kids or fake I care about your mother. But if I treat you, I've just got to tell you in that regard, here is my pandemic story. I've got a team of 15 people during the pandemic, and we've got a lot of stuff going on still, praise the Lord. But we do have about 10 or 15 Zoom meetings a week. and call it early in the pandemic. And you have not been late or missed a single one of those meetings. And I come up to you, and I do have a smile on my face, and I say to you, I'm going to take points off and give you kind of a bad evaluation. And, you're heartbroken or so on. I said, listen, you've been at every meeting on time. I happen to know about your life. You've got kids you're taking care of. You've got a husband or a wife who's still trying to teach in the 3rd grade class from the 2nd floor of the house. I said, you got a lot of shit going down. Take care of it. We're not in the efficiency business at the moment. I'd love to see you do your job well and so on, but please don't be on time every day, because I know what that costs you. And that's a literal conversation, not a figurative conversation. And, again, it just, that's excellence. That's excellence. And, eventually it'll add up to all that stuff like productivity and higher quality, which is good stuff. And it makes profit. And I'm in favor of capitalism and making profit. But the way it happens is one little conversation at a time. We're coming into spring and the daffodils are out where I am, but it's the middle of January and it's colder than the dickens. And on the way to work in an F2F world, you stop by a florist on the side of the street and you pick up a bunch of pretty blooming flowers and you carry it into the office and stuff it into a bowl on the whatever counter when you come in. And that's excellence. It's a little teeny itty bitty lift of the spirit, but it does rub off. And it is, as I said, I did this thing as an engineer, I'm required to think in equations. I gave a speech years ago and I said, well, my equation is K equals R equals P. Kindness equals repeat business equals profit.
Nice.
And it does cheapen the word kindness a little bit. And I don't mean that, obviously. You can tell that from our conversation and your engagement with my work in the past, but it's true.
I'm going to throw out one last prompt here, and then Brooke has a final question for you. But I've got to ask you this because this has been such a big part of my life. I wrote a book about personal branding in the digital age, and you were the one that really sort of started that whole idea with your famous article many years ago about personal branding, really defining the term. So what's the difference between personal branding versus self-promotion?
Of all the jillion questions that you could have asked, that's my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
And it is my favorite because so damn many people misinterpreted the brand you discussion.
Mm-hmm.
The brand you discussion said, we have outsourcing going on, we've got this going on, and we've got that going on, and you can no longer survive as not being Tom Peters, but coming to work with a little placard that says employee 123. You have to stand for something, to have some special expertise or this or that or the other. You can't just be a cipher. And what people translated that into was self-marketing. And I said it is the antithesis of marketing. You are a project manager and I'm on your team. I also call it sucking up versus sucking down and sucking sideways. The way my career is going to explode is that I'm on a team and you're my project manager for 30 days or 6 months. And I am an incredible contributor. And you say to your friend, Molly, my project's winding down. I know you've got another project coming along. For God's sakes, grab Tom Peters before somebody else does. You wouldn't believe what he contributed to our team. I wasn't carrying a sign around saying, with a Tide soap label on my chest saying I am a brand. It's the opposite. And, in general, we are slimming down the hierarchies. Sucking up to a boss is a waste. I sucked sideways to all the project managers. It was even true of me years ago when I was at the now infamous, but then famous McKinsey and Company. If you were a bad consultant, somebody assigned you to a team. If you were a good consultant, 20 people wanted you to be on their team, and you never had to do the least bit of marketing or what have you. It's about relationships. And, now, this is off a little bit, but I just want to make the teeny diversion. And that is, I call it sucking down. And I actually got it from a book in a way called Charlie Wilson's War. And it was made into a movie and so on and so forth. But there was this guy whose name was Gus something or other, a very long Greek name that I'm sorry to say, to be able to pronounce. And he was a mid-level person in the CIA, and he got things done that people 4 levels above him couldn't. And that's because he had befriended people in the bowels of the organizations who ran the IT department, who ran this department or the finance department. And when he needed a hand, he didn't make an appointment with the big boss 7 weeks from now. He went down to Harry, who knew Jane, who did that stuff in the finance department, and said, look, I need a little help. And he was famous for helping them. It was who he was. Maybe it's a Greek thing, and I think it may be to some extent, is he was famous for giving people in the quote unquote bottom of the organization a little bit of a hand with personal stuff. To give them a letter of recommendation when they wanted to apply for a community college course and so on. And so, I'm delighted that the brand U idea took off, and I'm saddened that to a significant degree it was misinterpreted. It is egolessness and being great at something rather than ego, which carries a sign around and pounds on your door until you answer.
Super important point. Couldn't agree more. Well, Brooke, why don't you take us home here with one last challenge for Tom?
Sure. So, Tom, you begin your new book with an urgent plea. And essentially you're saying, listen to me, damn it, which I feel like I say constantly. But we probably have thousands of marketers from around the world who are going to be listening to this interview today. And I want to know that if you had one message to take away from your new book and apply it to marketing, what would that be? What would you tell the people who are listening today?
You have a mother. You have a wife or husband. You've got kids, and let's call them over 18. Can you, honest to gosh, go home to your wife, your mother, your kids, what have you, and with incredible pride, tell them about the marketing campaign you guys have just launched and how it's going to make the world just a teeny bit better? There's a quote in my book which comes from the former chief design guy at Apple, Johnny Ive, and he said, I know it's arrogant, but we really just hope that the products we develop just might be a little teeny bit helpful to humanity. And I would say that I'd say it to everybody pretty much, but, take a look, this should never say this to a marketer. The sales will take care of themselves, which isn't 100% true, but can you feel good about what you've done? When I was at McKinsey, I worked with Frito-Lay, and I got to know the people there, and I really liked them. And then there was a book that was called Fast Food Nation or something like that. And it talked about, even smarter than you and I, Brooke, amazingly enough, it talked about these high power chemists who were redesigning Cheetos so that the more you ate, the more you'd want. If I am the mother if I am the father of that chemist, I'm kind of really sad that that's the way George ended up, and I mean, it's an awful story on every dimension. But could you, Mr. Ms. Marketer, tell the story of Cheetos to your 16-year-old kid when you're trying to help her or him, deal as a decent human being with humanity? So I'm not asking you to change the world, maybe a little bit, but just decency and contribution. The New York Times columnist David Brooks wrote a column. It's mentioned in the book, and it's so fabulous. And he contrasts what he calls resume virtues and eulogy virtues. Resume virtues say, Tom Peters was in the Navy for 4 years, including Vietnam. He has 4 degrees from Stanford and Cornell. He wrote a book that sold a jillion copies, and so on and so forth. It's those kinds of accomplishments. The eulogy virtues is, Brooke is my closest friend, and at the memorial service for me, Brooke is going to do a little 3-minute deal. What does Brooke say about me? She doesn't say, you would not believe how many books In Search of Excellence sold over the 20 years after it was published. You're going to say he had a message and he tried his damnedest to live that message of making a little contribution to humanity. And so what I say to practical people, marketers, finance people, HR people, I don't care. At the end of the day, hey, Brooke, how was your eulogy virtue score today? And again, a message of this conversation the three of us have been having, if the eulogy virtue score is high, the reality is it's going to be reflected in a marketing program that, in fact, many people have said this, and it always needs saying, profit is a byproduct. You don't come to work and want to make a profit. You come to work, one hopes, and want to be of value to humanity, to the 7 people on your team, to the customers who will interact, with the products you have designed and now what you are trying to sell. And now I'm going to make you the big boss, Brooke. David Ogilvy of Ogilvy and Mather, probably the greatest advertising agency ever, said he had one thing that was his favorite job as the agency head. And that one thing was firing clients who had mistreated his people.
What a great,
he said, yeah, it's just, and it's just, he gave the question. He would go in to see you and he would say, I've come to visit you personally.
Wow.
A lot of the people who work for you are not the most pleasant people in the world, and they have treated my people unpleasantly. And that is not the way I do business in the world. So I'm willing to thank you for your business, but I do want to tell you that we're withdrawing from the account as of the end of the month. And please don't send an invoice for the last month's activities.
Well, Tom Peters, you've had a message and you've done your damnedest to get the message out. And we thank you so much for honoring us and our audience around the world for this exceptional insight into not just your thinking, but your heart and your passion and your compassion. So Tom, thank you so much from our entire global audience at the Marketing Companion.
Well, thank you so much. As you said, I said to people, if you want to understand what I've written, you have to show me a signed certificate of graduation from the 4th grade. There is nothing in this book that requires more than that. But I do care about it. And I partially care about it for that reason, to use that overused term. It ain't rocket science, dude. It is, treating fellow human beings as they deserve to be treated. And obviously that message, hopefully, obviously that message is multiplied by 10 during the pandemic. And maybe we do see the light of the tunnel now, but I've also said, and you probably have read it somewhere, is the way you have behaved or are behaving. This is the boss's project. And a boss to me is a project manager of a 3-person team for 2 weeks. So it's not boss. The way you've behaved during this period of time is the definition of your adult lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I also said, listen, and I have this thing, the COVID-19 leadership and so on. And I said, you can boil it down to 4 words. Don't be an asshole. Be a decent human being. And maybe somebody will say something nice about you at your funeral. Who the hell knows? I mean, I do have this slide when I'm using PowerPoint, and it is a picture of a tombstone. And on the tombstone, it says $7,318,626.11. Market value of his portfolio the day that he died. Ain't nobody have a tombstone with their net worth on it. Remember that.
Thanks so much, Tom, and best wishes with all your future endeavors. I know you said you wanted to learn the names of the birds and learn the names of the plants in your yard as you go forward, and I'm sure you'll become an expert at that too. Thank you so much.